They say betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the ones who call you family. I didn't scream when I saw them. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the man I loved. On stage, hand in hand with my cousin. Correction, my adoptive sister. She wore my dress. He wore the smile that used to be mine. The flashing lights of the gala cameras caught every angle. Charlotte Lancaster, radiant in red. Damien Shaw, the rising golden boy of Silicon Square. The new power couple of Boston. And me? I was the ghost in the crowd. Not invited. Not acknowledged. Not even remembered. It was the Tech Awards night. A night Damien and I used to dream about when we stayed up building his pitch deck in my apartment. A night I should have stood beside him as his fiancée. Instead, Charlotte was the one kissing him when they won Startup of the Year. My hands didn't tremble. Not even when Charlotte caught sight of me in the back row. Her expression faltered for half a second, enough for me to see it. She knew I was there. She wanted me to see. I wasn't born into the Lancaster name. I was absorbed into it. After my parents died in a car crash when I was 10, my father's sister, Adele Lancaster, took me in. Out of obligation, out of pity, never out of love. Her daughter, Charlotte, was 2 years older. A porcelain angel to everyone else. To me, she was a well-dressed storm. She knew how to smile without meaning it. How to say, "bless your heart," and make it sound like an insult. And she knew how to destroy me without ever leaving a trace. But I never let her win. Not at school, not in sports, not in scholarships. I earned my way into Stanford. She followed into Columbia. She partied her way through a communications degree. I built a resume sharp enough to draw blood. When I moved to Boston at 25, I thought I'd finally outrun her shadow. I had a fresh job in venture marketing, my own loft apartment, and for once, a life not intersecting with Charlotte's. Until Damien happened. I met him at a pitch night hosted by an investor group I was consulting for. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but his voice was steady. His vision was sharp. He spoke about cities, spaces, sustainability, and I listened, completely disarmed. He was 6'2", but never used height to dominate. He asked questions no one else did. And when I challenged his projections, he didn't flinch. He smiled. 3 days later, he emailed, "Still thinking about your question on operating costs. Want to debate it over coffee?" Coffee became dinner. Dinner became weekends. And before I knew it, Damien Shaw was waking up in my bed every Monday morning, hair tousled, bare feet in my kitchen, kissing me like I was the center of his universe. He said he'd never met someone who understood his brain like I did. I said I'd never felt seen like I did with him. I wasn't just his girlfriend. I was his partner. In business, in life, in everything. When he raised his first round of funding, I was the one who helped craft his investor deck. When he landed his first major client, I was the one who negotiated the terms behind closed doors. No one else knew how much of his success had my fingerprints on it. Not even Charlotte. The first time she met him, she was pleasant. Too pleasant. We were at a family brunch Adele insisted on. Charlotte arrived 30 minutes late, kissed both my cheeks, and said, "So this is the infamous Damien. Lena's been hiding you." Her smile was syrup sweet. Her eyes, calculating. Damien was polite, as always. Answered her questions, laughed at her dry jokes. Never noticed the way she leaned in just a little too close, or the way her hand lingered on his elbow longer than necessary. I noticed, but I told myself, she's just being friendly. Just Charlotte. Just noise. 2 weeks later, she invited Damien to a networking gala. Without me? He told me about it. Said it felt weird, so he declined. I smiled and kissed him harder that night. Told myself I'd won. Again. I didn't realize that while I was resting, she was studying. While I was loving, she was planning. The beginning of the end came quietly. Damien started getting more secretive. Late nights became longer. Texts grew shorter. He said he was busy. He said he was under pressure. He said everything but the truth. Then, one Thursday evening, my friend Maya sent me a photo. Charlotte and Damien. At the Seaport District. Drinks in hand, heads close, laughing. Maya's message was only 5 words. "Isn't that your boyfriend?" I confronted him that night. "Are you sleeping with Charlotte?" He looked stunned, then guilty, then cold. "We just talked. She needed someone to vent to." "And you were her emotional support?" He didn't answer. That night, I slept on the couch. 2 days later, he moved out. 1 week later, he stopped returning my calls. 3 weeks later, he appeared on the front page of Tech Pulse Weekly. CEO Damien Shaw debuts with socialite Charlotte Lancaster. Power duo on the rise. My name wasn't mentioned once. People asked me later, why didn't I fight? Why didn't I expose them? Because I knew something Charlotte never learned. Victory means nothing if the war isn't finished. She thought she took everything, but I still had the one thing she didn't. Silence. The kind of silence that plans, that waits, that rebuilds in shadows. I didn't disappear. I retreated. And when I returned, I wouldn't take him back. I wouldn't ask for an apology. I would take everything she built, and watch it burn. Not in anger, but in justice. And that would be the beginning of my story. Boston was never kind to the fallen. Here, failure doesn't earn you sympathy. It earns you whispers. And if you're a woman, especially one who let a man go to your cousin, those whispers become knives. I packed my apartment in silence. Box by box, frame by frame. The photo of me and Damien at his product launch? Trash. The award we won for Best Emerging Brand Strategy? I left it on the shelf. Let Charlotte see it every time she came over. There was no dramatic exit. No tearful goodbye. Just a quiet message to my landlord. And one text to Maya. Gone. Don't ask. I'll call you when it's time. I moved back into my grandmother's old house in Ashfield. A small town buried in the hills, 3 hours west of Boston. The place where I learned to tie my shoes. Where I kissed my first crush behind the library. Where the world forgot you if you let it. I let it. Grief doesn't always feel like sadness. Sometimes, it feels like fog. You wake up, eat cereal, scroll through job boards. You shower, you walk, you breathe. And still, none of it feels real. For the first 2 weeks, I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't cry either. It was worse than crying. It was the numbness of being hollow. My Aunt Adele never called. Of course not. She'd gotten what she wanted. Her daughter, her golden Charlotte, was now engaged to a rising tech star. Charlotte's post came 2 weeks after I vanished. A perfectly lit selfie. Damien's arm around her waist. The caption, "When you know, see." Over 18, 0 likes. Comments from socialites and startup founders. Media pickup within an hour. But it was one comment that broke me. Maya, under a burner account, wrote, "Hope it was worth ruining your family for." It got buried in hundreds of replies. But I saw it, and I saved it. Not because it hurt. Because it was the first confirmation anyone else had noticed the fire. And where there's fire, I could build smoke. I spent my nights with a notebook. No laptop, no digital trail, just pen and paper. And everything I remembered. Names. Dates. Financial moves. Partnership agreements. All the invisible threads I'd helped Damien weave in silence. He may have removed me from the story, but the foundations? They were still mine. The world didn't know it, but I did, and so did he. That was my first leverage point. But I didn't want Damien back. This wasn't about love anymore. This was about something older, darker, the kind of justice that doesn't go through courts, the kind that whispers, "Wait your turn, then strike." I began reading again. Psychology, power dynamics, corporate warfare, books Charlotte would never touch. I journaled, but not like therapy. More like mapping a battlefield. What were her tells? How did she infiltrate? What did she gain? And more importantly, what could I take that she couldn't survive losing? Not Damien. He was never the goal. He was just the prize she dangled to see me flinch. She wanted my reaction. I gave her silence. And in silence, I began creating a new identity. Her name was Ella Marin, a 34-year-old investor with West Coast roots. Minimal social media, private LinkedIn with curated connections, a pitch deck template stored on an encrypted USB. Ella wore tailored suits, drove a leased Jaguar, worked through a boutique VC firm based out of LA. Her first test? A virtual pitch session hosted by Damien's new company, Etherworks. They were raising Series B funding for a smart modular housing project. I registered with a burner email and a voice modulator, just enough disguise to stay unseen. When Damien began his pitch, my heart stuttered. Not because of his face, but because I remembered writing parts of that pitch. The slides, the phrasing, the tagline, designing dignity into every home. That was my line, and he was still using it. Without credit, without shame. It was like watching someone steal your diary and read it on stage. But I smiled, because that meant I still had fingerprints in his house. And you can't build empires on stolen bricks forever. I sent the follow-up email through Ella's address. Compelling presentation. Curious about valuation projections and municipal contracts. Would love to schedule a call. The reply came within hours. Not from Damien. From Charlotte. Hi, Ella. This is Charlotte Lancaster, CFO and co-founder of Etherworks. We're thrilled by your interest. Would love to discuss opportunities. I stared at the screen. CFO. Co-founder. She'd embedded herself fully now. Not just socially, not just romantically. Financially, legally, publicly. This wasn't a love story anymore. It was a heist. She hadn't just stolen Damien. She was now stealing Meath ghost of my work, my intellect, my instincts, and parading it around with a perfect smile and a Cartier watch. Fine. She wanted the spotlight. I'd let her have it, because I was already building the fire behind it. And when the curtains dropped, the ashes would spell one name. Mine. Charlotte never liked fire. She liked candles. Controlled, curated, softly perfumed. She liked light that could be extinguished with a breath, not the kind that consumes buildings. But I wasn't a candle anymore. I was a furnace, and I knew exactly how to burn. Our first official meeting was virtual. Zoom call, 7 p.m. EST. Her face appeared in the top right corner of my screen, polished, confident, glossy in a silk blouse I once helped her pick for a college interview. Her tone? All business. Ella, thank you for taking the time. Damien's spoken highly of your interest. Damien appeared beside her, slightly out of focus. He looked leaner, paler, a little older. Stress ages fast when you realize your victories rest on stolen bones. I smiled through the modulator. Calm, controlled, just the right amount of disinterest. Your projections are optimistic. That excites me. But I'm not in the business of gambling. I prefer leverage. Charlotte's eyes narrowed. Not suspicious, just alert. Like a woman trying to read a stock chart that won't sit still. Damien answered first. We're open to structured capital. We've done convertible notes before. I let the silence stretch, then replied, I'm more interested in influence. If I bring my fund in, I want voting rights. Charlotte blinked. Only once. But I saw it. The twitch. She thought she had control. She always does. Until someone shows her what control actually costs. Over the next month, I deepened Ella's involvement. Slowly, strategically. I reviewed term sheets, made suggestions, subtle ones, recommended restructuring their burn rate model. They took the bait. Every time. I planted seeds through Ella that would later be framed as financial inconsistencies, tiny red flags the SEC would love, but that a desperate startup would ignore. Charlotte was thrilled, called Ella refreshing, even invited her to a Women in Tech networking brunch in Cambridge. You'll love the crowd, she wrote. Finally, some real women with brains and bank accounts. I RSVP'd yes. Then booked a round trip to Seattle instead. Because my plan didn't need me to be there. It just needed them to think I would be. That morning, Charlotte posted a story from the event. A photo with 3 other female founders captioned, Power, Grace, Deals in Heels, UG, Women Who Invest. But what caught my eye? In the background, barely visible, was Damien, seated alone at the bar. No smile, no eye contact. He wasn't part of the inner circle anymore. Charlotte had moved past the man she stole. She was the face now, the brand, the empire. And Damien? He was just a man in the corner, forgotten, just like me once. That week, I received an email from a burner I hadn't used in years. Subject line, You're not invisible, Lena. I stared at it for a long time. No greeting, no signature, no threat, just the subject. It meant one thing. Someone new. Maybe Damien. Maybe Maya. Maybe someone I hadn't considered. But it didn't matter, because I was ready. I already had my next move. Using Ella's contacts, I arranged for Etherworks to be invited into a roundtable at a major urban planning summit in D.C. Why? Because I knew Charlotte couldn't resist it. Publicity, influence, policy-level visibility. Her version of heroin. They accepted immediately. Sent their keynote deck to the organizers. Even confirmed Damien as the primary speaker. What they didn't know? The conference director Daryl Groves was my college roommate's husband. And I had full access to all submitted material, including the slide deck. And inside it, pages and pages of my original phrasing. Lines lifted word for word from the white papers I wrote 3 years ago for Damien's original project. My research, my phrasing, my citations stripped of my name. It was like watching someone forge your signature over your own bones. That night, I did 3 things. I printed the deck. I forwarded it to a private legal consultant I'd quietly retained under NDA. I drafted a press release, unsigned, unattributed, but fully documented. The subject line read, How Etherworks Built a House of Cardson Stolen Bricks. I didn't send it. Not yet. Because I wasn't done watching Charlotte celebrate. The best part of fire is letting the target dance in the light before they feel the heat. There are 2 kinds of truths. The one you tell to be free, and the one you hold back until it can destroy someone. I wasn't chasing closure. I was building a case. Every time Charlotte smiled for a camera, I archived it. Every podcast where she spoke like she'd built Etherworks from scratch, I transcribed it. Every contract Damien filed without reading using words I had crafted, I backed up twice. You can't erase someone who still holds the blueprint. The Urban Planning Summit was held at the Willard in D.C. 4 days of suits, speeches, and overcooked optimism. Aetherworks had their panel scheduled for day 3. A full ballroom. Live broadcast. The kind of platform Charlotte fantasized about when she was still interning at marketing firms with borrowed handbags. I wasn't there, but my fingerprints were, because on the night before the presentation, someone slipped a sealed envelope under the event director's door. Inside, a copy of Aetherworks' presentation, a time-stamped screenshot of my original research from 3 years ago, a one-page comparison showing nearly identical language on 5 slides, a short note. You may want to verify authorship before letting them take the stage. By morning, there was quiet panic behind the curtains. Charlotte and Damien were pulled into a closed-door meeting. The organizers asked for source material, backup documents, a legal sign-off. Charlotte smiled, I'm sure. She always does. But Damien? I imagine his hands were already sweating, because Damien knew. He always knew. I watched the fallout unfold via encrypted messages from Daryl. By noon, Aetherworks was voluntarily withdrawing from the panel. The official statement blamed a clerical error and internal content misalignment. But the damage was already done. Whispers spread faster than press releases, and one investor I knew personally leaked just enough to the press for a headline to form. Aetherworks accused of IP misuse. Startup withdraws from major summit. It was on TechPulse 2 hours later. No names, no quotes. But Charlotte's carefully built image began to crack. And I was just getting started. The next play was financial. I had traced enough movement in their Series B to know Charlotte had been shifting discretionary funds into a shell consulting entity, one registered under a name I instantly recognized. A friend of hers. A stylist. That wasn't just shady. It was illegal. And it was enough to prompt a formal review if submitted to the right regulatory inbox. Which, of course, I did. Anonymously. With attachments. Charlotte wouldn't know where it came from. She'd suspect competitors. Old enemies. Maybe even Damien. But never me. Because in her mind, I was gone. That's the danger of narcissists. They assume silence means surrender. What they never calculate for is precision. 3 weeks later, Maya called. I hadn't heard her voice in 6 months. Not since I disappeared. Tell me this headline has something to do with you, she said without preamble. I paused, then answered honestly. It has everything to do with me. Holy hell, Lena, she whispered. I knew you were planning something, but this is war. It's not war, I said. It's recalibration. Maya was silent for a beat. Then, do you need help? That broke me more than any betrayal. Because despite everything, despite me shutting her out, disappearing, going cold, Maya was still my person. And now, I was finally letting her back in. Yes, I said softly. I need someone to leak the next piece. Say less, she replied. We targeted Benevolence Ventures next, one of Aetherworks' biggest investors. I had everything I needed. Emails showing Charlotte inflated user engagement numbers. Screenshots of staged beta test feedback. Internal Slack chats hinting that the affordable housing model was quietly being dropped in favor of higher-end modular units to appease richer clients. In short, they were pitching one dream, building another, and lying to both sides. That wasn't just bad optics. It was fraud adjacent. The leak was picked up within 48 hours. TechCrunch. This time. Headline. Modular Mirage? Aetherworks faces scrutiny over investor misrepresentation. Charlotte went silent on social media for 5 straight days. That was unheard of. And when she finally reappeared, no filters. No branded backdrop. Just a poorly lit iPhone video of her trying to explain pivot strategy and miscommunication. Comments were brutal. Even Damien looked like a ghost when he appeared behind her for 5 seconds, then vanished mid-video. It was glorious. But I wasn't smiling. Not yet. Because there was still one piece left. The truth. The kind I'd been saving. Not for them. For me. It's not an explosion. It's not fire. Collapse has a different sound. It's quiet. Like paper slipping off a desk. Like the pause between denial and admission. Like Charlotte standing in front of a room full of shareholders. And forgetting how to smile. The emergency board meeting was not on the calendar. Aetherworks tried to pretend it was routine. Internal restructuring. New directions. But the room smelled like blood. Even on Zoom, I could see it. Charlotte wore white. Power move. Except her lips were dry, and the left cuff of her blouse was wrinkled. She'd rolled it up and forgotten to press it back down. Rookie mistake. Damien sat to her right, head low, not speaking. He hadn't spoken publicly in over a week. The media had started referring to her as the true operator behind Aetherworks. She loved it, until it became a liability. A woman named Cassandra Doyle led the meeting. Investor rep from Benevolence. Sharp bob. Sharper tone. Before we proceed with funding decisions, we require clarity on the allegations currently under media and regulatory review. Charlotte cleared her throat. The accusations are grossly exaggerated. We're cooperating fully. Cassandra didn't blink. Did you or did you not fabricate user engagement data in your Series B presentation? That data came from beta testing with third-party research firms, which were contracted by you personally, not the company. The room shifted. Breaths held. Eyes narrowed. Charlotte opened her mouth, then closed it. That was her first real silence. But the kill shot didn't come from Cassandra. It came from Damien. Of all people. He spoke slowly, quietly, like someone peeling off a mask they've worn too long. The architecture model we presented at the Urban Summit wasn't our design. Cassandra raised an eyebrow. Pardon? It wasn't ours, he repeated. It was based on earlier drafts from someone else. Charlotte snapped. That's not true. Damien, what are you doing? I'm telling the truth. You don't owe them anything. You don't owe her anything. Her voice cracked on the last word. And I knew in that moment. She knew. She knew it was me. She just didn't know where I was, or how I'd gotten this close. But she felt it. And that was enough. What happened next was administrative carnage. Benevolence pulled their term sheet. 2 other investors followed. A 4th issued a formal complaint with the SEC. Aetherworks' valuation plummeted overnight. They suspended all new hiring, laid off 1/3 of their dev team, put their Beacon Street HQ up for sublease. In less than 6 days, Charlotte went from Forbes feature to financial cancer. And Damien? He vanished from LinkedIn. His personal website went offline. He stopped appearing in meetings altogether, but not before sending one final email. To me. Subject: if this is you, I understand. Body: she took everything from you. I helped her. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed you to know. I remember who really built this company, and I'm sorry I erased you. I didn't reply, not because I hated him, but because it wasn't about him anymore. 2 nights later, I received a voicemail. Charlotte. Her voice was lower, ragged, less composed. Lena, if you're listening, congratulations. You got what you wanted. Pause. Are you proud of this? Watching me fall? Watching him crawl away? Was it worth it? Another pause. Then, quieter. I never hated you, you know. I just couldn't stand how easy things came to you. Even your grief looked poetic. Mine? Mine was ugly. The message cut off at 1 minute 58 seconds. Just before the 2-minute limit, no tears, no begging, just the final sound of a woman realizing she's alone in a world she built on ashes. And this time, no one's coming to save her. I thought revenge would feel like thunder, but it didn't. It felt quiet, too quiet, like walking out of a courtroom where the verdict was guilty, but no one clapped, no music, no victory dance, just silence. And silence is complicated. It echoes. The week after Etherworks collapsed, I stayed in my apartment and barely moved. Not from grief, not from guilt, but because I had nowhere to aim anymore. For a year, every step I took was guided by one thing: ruin Charlotte. Now that it was done, I didn't know what came next. I didn't want Damien, didn't miss him, but I kept replaying that last voicemail from Charlotte, her voice cracking, saying I made grief look poetic. That line haunted me more than anything else she'd said, because it wasn't an insult. It was envy. And maybe, just maybe, it was honest. I booked a last-minute ticket to Ashfield. No calls, no warnings. Just threw a duffel bag over my shoulder and disappeared again. The town hadn't changed. Same cracked sidewalks. Same whispering trees. Same grocery clerk who still called me sweetheart, even though I was nearly 30. I stayed at my grandmother's cottage, lit the old fireplace, pulled the dusty quilt over my knees, and sat for hours, with no plan, no war, no weapon, just me. That was the first time I realized how much of myself I had burned to keep that revenge fire going. 3 days into my self-imposed retreat, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter. Handwritten, cream envelope, no return address. The handwriting? Damien's. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Lena, I've accepted an offer to consult overseas. South Korea. 6 months. Maybe longer. Charlotte's moved out. Her lawyer contacted mine. It's ending. Whatever it was. There's no pitch here. No groveling. I just wanted you to know. You were never invisible. Not to me. Not really. I was just too weak to stand between you and her. I let the storm in. And you were the one who got struck by lightning. I hope you find peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't depend on someone else losing. I think you've earned that now. D. I folded the letter. Tucked it in the back of a novel on my shelf. Didn't cry. But I sat still for a long time. Because somewhere in that letter was the first thing Damien had ever said to me that felt like truth. I stayed in Ashfield for 2 more weeks. Walked without earbuds. Cooked from scratch. Listened to wind more than words. One night, I looked at the stars and realized I didn't want Charlotte to suffer anymore. I didn't care. Her pain no longer fed me. Her downfall no longer thrilled me. That's when I knew the revenge had fully left my bloodstream. That I wasn't surviving against her anymore. I was simply surviving. Maybe even starting to live. Maya visited the following weekend. She brought wine, dumplings, and an apology for ever doubting how deep I'd gone. We sat on the porch swing, watching the leaves drift like soft regrets. You did it, she said. You actually brought her down. Yeah, I replied. But what now? You write the next chapter, she said simply. But maybe this time, it's not about burning things. Maybe it's about building. I looked at her, felt something settle in my chest. A truth. A quiet one. The next morning, I opened my laptop. New document. Blank page. Cursor blinking. Title: Blueprints for the Burned. Subtitle: A Field Guide for Women Who Lost Everything. and still decided to rise. I started typing. This time, not to destroy, but to rebuild. Not from hate, but from knowing. Because revenge might end the pain, but only healing ends the war. Healing doesn't make a sound. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand applause. It arrives the way spring does, softly, then all at once. 6 months after the collapse of Aetherworks, I walked into a small bookstore in Portland. Not for headlines. Not to hide. But to speak. My book blueprints for the burn ad quietly become a sleeper hit. Not viral. Not explosive. But passed from hand to hand like a whispered truth. Women messaged me daily. Not fans. Not followers. But survivors. I thought I was alone. You gave words to what I lived. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted my name back. And isn't that the core of it? We don't want to win. We want to be seen. To be believed. To not be erased. I stayed after the event to help the staff clean up. As I was stacking chairs, a woman approached me. Early 30s. Tired eyes. Clear voice. You're Lena Hartley, right? I nodded. I used to work for Charlotte. I froze. She held up her hands. I'm not here to fight. I just wanted to say thank you. For what? For showing the rest of us we weren't crazy. That what she did, how she operated it, wasn't in our heads. I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't angry. She wasn't seeking closure. She had already found it. And now, she was passing it to me. That night, I opened my email for the first time in days. There was a message waiting. No subject line. No signature. Just this. She left Boston. No press. No fanfare. Just gone. Last I heard, she changed her last name. You won. I closed the email. Didn't reply. Because there was nothing left to say. Winning had never been the goal. Freedom was. And now, I had it. A year to the day since the last voicemail. I found myself sitting on the same bench where Damien and I once talked about building a life together. Not mourning. Not reminiscing. Just present. It's strange how ghosts stop haunting you. The moment you stop needing them to. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't hate her, either. They were just people. Flawed. Weak. Messy. And me? I was still standing. Still breathing. Still building. But now, not from anger. From peace. People think revenge is about reclaiming power. It's not. Real power is walking away. Without needing the last word. It's rebuilding a life they can't touch. A joy they can't fake. A self they can't recognize anymore. That's what I did. That's who I became. And now, when I walk into a room, I don't look for Charlotte. I don't look for Damien. I look for the woman in the mirror. And finally, she's looking back.